You finally made the decision. You said yes to God, and for real this time. You stopped abandoning yourself to keep everyone else comfortable, and you started doing what God told you to do. And then people just started acting different. The invite stopped, the phone got quiet, people who said they supported you suddenly disappeared. And now you're wondering, what happened? Well, what if people leaving isn't proof that you made the wrong decision? What if it's evidence that your decision actually changed something? Because obedience was never about keeping everybody comfortable. It was about keeping your yes to God. And your yes is a disruptor, whether you meant it to be or not. Sometimes the moment you stop people pleasing and compromising your boundaries to keep everybody else happy, you find out which relationships depended on the old version of you. And this is where it gets hard because we're wired to interpret rejection as a warning sign. When people pull away, we start automatically second guessing ourselves. Was I too much? Should I have said it differently? Maybe I should just go back and fix it. Especially if you spent years keeping the peace, disappointing someone can feel like you're doing something wrong, even when you're finally doing what God told you to do. But there's a man in scripture who knows exactly what it feels like to make a decision for God and immediately discover that your yes comes with a cost. His obedience affected his relationships, his comfort, his security, and everything familiar to him. And his story shows us something we don't talk about enough. Sometimes obedience will cost you access to people who can't go where God is taking you. And so today, we're going to talk about 3 things that can happen to your relationship when you finally obey God, and how to recognize the difference between rejection and necessary separation, and what to do when obedience leaves you standing in a season that feels a lot lonelier than you expected it to be. Because losing people's approval doesn't automatically mean you lost God's direction. Now, let me show you what happened to Abraham, because that's the man I was talking about. Abraham walked up Mount Moriah by himself. He took Isaac, he took the wood, he took the fire, and Genesis tells us the servants stayed at the bottom of that mountain. They didn't climb with him. Nobody carried the weight all the way up there with him. Abraham had the hardest assignment of his life sitting on his shoulders, and the people closest to the situation stayed exactly where they were, at the bottom, watching from a distance they chose. That's the picture. That's what total obedience does. It creates a gap immediately between you and the people who cannot see what God is doing on the inside of you. They didn't hear what you heard. So when you start walking differently, they're standing at the bottom of the mountain confused, and some of them aren't coming up. Your yes disrupts patterns around you. It's not because you're trying to disrupt anything. It's because obedience is loud, even when you're silent. And when you stop showing up the way you used to show up, it makes people look at their own stuff, whether they want to or not. And a lot of people don't want to. Just think about yourself at one point. You didn't want to either. And some people are not ready to face what your obedience is exposing in them. You didn't point a finger at anybody. You just changed. But your change becomes a mirror, and mirrors are uncomfortable for people who aren't ready to look. So let's talk about the real reasons people pull back, because I'm not going to dance around this any longer. Some people feel left behind. You're moving and they're not, and that gap feels like rejection to them, even when it really isn't. The second reason, some don't want to see you do better than them. And that's hard to say out loud, to be honest, but it's true. And you've probably felt that at some point. And others act from a place of pure fear. That's number 3, because they can no longer lean on you to keep their old pattern comfortable. You were the one who enabled the cycle. You were the one who picked up the phone at 2 a.m. You were the one who stayed in the compromise with them. And now you won't. And that's terrifying for somebody who built their comfort around your compromise. This is the cost of obedience. This is the cost of saying yes and making a decision. Nobody sits you down before the decision and says, hey, some of these people are going to leave you, but they show you the same thing they showed Abraham. Obedience will take you to a place your community can't always follow. At least not yet, and maybe not at all. In the moments in that space between the grief, because you might feel that. You might feel grief, real grief over losing somebody who used to be close to your heart, where you did the faithful thing and instead of instant peace, you got instant silence and self-doubt. Just sitting there wondering if you're the problem because people you respected are judging you or just walking away without a word. And you might be questioning if you even heard God correctly because the room got quiet after you started obeying him. And that doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're human and you expected obedience to feel like this, applause. But a lot of times obedience feels like a hallway with no lights on and no walls, that in-between space. But loneliness after obedience is the space where God does the work that can never happen with an audience. And Abraham didn't get feedback from the servants on the walk up the mountain. He got God and only God. And that's exactly what shaped him for what came next. Your worth was never up for a vote. Human approval cannot replace what God has already said over you. And if you're waiting for the people who left to validate your decision, you're going to wait a long time, because some of them are never coming back around to say, oh, I get it now. Not every relationship that shifts after obedience is the same kind of loss, and you need a way to tell the difference, because treating every closed door the same will wreck you in some way. There's seasonal endings. That's distance with respect. Both of you are growing, just in different directions for now. And the door stays open even if nobody's walking through it right at this second. And there's no bitterness attached to that. But then there's the toxic release. That's control, that's sin. That's somebody draining your spirit every time you get near them. That one doesn't get a pause button. That one gets a permanent goodbye, because a temporary break won't fix a permanent problem. Just like God is leading you, you continue to allow his light to shine through you while you walk in obedience. So what do you do in the gap while you're figuring out which one you're dealing with? The seasonal ending or the toxic relationship? You stay close to God. You let him renew your mind while you're waiting on new community to show up, because it will show up, just not on your timeline. And closure doesn't always come from other people. Sometimes closure comes from you shutting the door yourself and walking straight through the one God has already opened for you. The decision cost you comfort, but it's building you a freedom the old crowd never could have afforded, because they were budgeting for your compromise, not your calling. So I want you to comment below, I'm standing, if you're choosing obedience, even without anybody's applause. And I want you to subscribe so you can continue to grow Glow Daily. And this is actually created for you, the builders. And come back around for the next part of this series, so we can go even deeper. Now, this is not going to cover the whole of all the things that are going to cost you when you decide to say yes and make that decision. But it's going to cover those really prevalent things that actually happen, so that you'll know how to walk by faith and not by sight in this season. So I hope this serves you well, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.